20, if you got a Bible. Exodus 20. And while you're turning there, I want to tell you a story. It's not real. A genie came up. That's how you know it's not real. There's a genie. He came up upon two men arguing about which one was going to be the greatest. And he said, make a wish. And whatever you wish, I will grant you as a genie, with one caveat. And the one caveat is your rival or your adversary, your enemy, opponent, whatever, your rival gets twice as much as what you get. Well, great, the man thought. I'm trying to argue about who's the greatest. I've got to figure out some way that I can make some kind of request from this guy that's going to make me greater. And so what in the world would you ask for in that situation, I wonder? What would he ask for in this situation? If he asked for riches, that'd be great for him. But the other man would have twice as many riches, and that wouldn't be great for him if he's trying to be better than somebody else. If he asked for power, then that'd be great for him, but his rival, his enemy, would have twice as much power, and that wouldn't be great for him. If he asked for fame, you get the idea. He'd have some fame, but his rival would have twice as much fame. He wouldn't get what he wanted. And so asking for money or for power or for fame or prestige or anything like that would not be good enough for this man's request from this genie. It eventually dawned on him, and he had a great idea, he thought, and he knew exactly what he wanted to ask for. He said to the genie, here's what I want. Make me blind in one eye so that my rival will get twice what I just asked for, and I'll be blind in one eye. I'll suffer some loss, but it'll be nothing compared with what my rival has. What would you say is the vice of this man? Genie comes and says, I'll grant you anything you want that's going to make you greater than somebody else. He doesn't ask for riches. He doesn't ask for fame. He doesn't ask for power or authority or prestige or anything like that. He asks for himself to suffer a little bit only because somebody else would suffer more. What would you say this man's vice, his sin, his desire was? It's not greed. It's not coveting. It's not even jealousy. Those are desires that leave us wanting more than what we have, no matter what other people have. The historical classic answer to what this man's vice was is very simply envy. Envy is a poison that infects some of our lives, again, without us even knowing it. And part of that, I think, may not even know what we really talk about when we talk about envy. If you're like me, we kind of have maybe four words that we think of as synonyms, and we use them interchangeably at times. And those words are covetousness and jealousy and greed and envy. I'd like to spend just a few minutes differentiating between these four and defining a little bit about what they are. Let's start with covetousness. That's the first one that shows up, at least by name. And it shows up in Exodus chapter 20, about verse 17, I think, because it's number 10 out of the original 10 commandments. And if you read through the 10 commandments, there are 9 that say, don't do this. Don't have any gods before me. Don't create any graven images. Do this. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. And then he begins this series of commands that tells the people of Israel what they should not be doing with other people. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness. And so the first 9 out of 9 commands, they all have something to do with action. Placing a God before God, creating a graven image, honoring your father and mother, murder and stealing and lying and things like that. All actions until you get to number 10. And command number 10 is a bit different because it's not even an action, it's an attitude, it's a thought, it's a desire, really. And here's the wording of commandment number 10. You shall not covet. There's the word, covetousness. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that is your neighbor's. There's no justification or I guess rationalization of why you should not do this. It's a very simple command of do not covet what belongs to somebody else. Begs the question, what do we talk about when we talk about covet? And I think the best definition I've ever found is this. Coveting is an inordinate desire for something that I do not currently have. It's not just a normal desire of something that I don't have, because I could desire to be better at preaching, and that'd be great. I could desire to have, I don't know, a better golf game, and that'd be okay. I could desire that thing. The problem with coveting is that it is an inordinate desire. It's an out-of-order desire. It's a disordered desire to have something that I do not have. And it can show up in different ways. And that may be where we get to talk about jealousy and greed and envy. So let's move on to second word on our screen right now, jealousy. We may use, again, jealousy as kind of a synonym to greed or envy, but jealousy is a bit different. Jealousy is a desire or a vice of something that I currently possess or currently have, I guess. It's guarding something that I currently have. It could be a spouse, it could be a position, it could be a title, it could be money, it could be anything material that I already have and I do not want to lose. Jealousy comes from the same root word as zeal, and so we kind of think about zealous and jealousy along the same lines, and that's good for us to be able to differentiate, because zeal is oftentimes represented in Scripture and in life as a good thing. I'm supposed to be zealous for good works. I'm supposed to be zealous for good things in life, and that means I care a lot about those things, and so I pursue those things that I care a lot about. That is zeal. That's what we talk about when we talk about zeal. God is described as a jealous God at times. And that doesn't mean that he has an inordinate desire for something that he does not have. It means that God has us as people and he wants to keep us. He cares about us, he has us, and he wants to guard us. And so he protects and provides and blesses in many ways in order to provide. That's good. That's a jealous God. It's not a bad, negative kind of thing. It's a good, zealous kind of thing. That leaves two words on the screen that are somewhat closely related, but there are differences. Greed, we'll start there. These are the two that we probably most often use as synonyms, greed and envy. But greed is pretty simply wanting something like other people have. I see somebody who has a nice car, and I'd like to have a nice car too. I see somebody who has a large house, and I kind of think to myself, maybe I'd like to have a nice house. I see somebody who has something or possesses something or is enjoying something, and I want something like that. That's greed. Envy is worse. Envy doesn't say, I want something like what you have. Envy says, I want the very thing that you have, the very thing that you possess. And that goes two ways. Number one, on envy, that means that I have something now that I want. And it also means that you don't have something that I don't want you to have. That's envy. Greed, in other words, is about having more. It doesn't matter what anybody else has. Greed is just about having more myself. Envy is about being more. It's about my having more than you so that I can be better than you, be more than you. That's envy. Greed is about more for me. Envy, it can be more about less for your neighbor. Greed delights in my own good fortune. I want something, I go get that thing, and I feel good about that. I like that. That is what greed does. Envy says, I don't really have to have anything extra in my life. As long as you have less, I'm okay. That's envy. It delights in my neighbor's misfortune. Greed simply wants my yard to be as weedless as the neighbor's yard. Envy doesn't care as long as the neighbor's yard has more weeds in his. In short, I think we define envy as a deep-seated fear that others have it better than I do. A deep-seated fear that others have it better than you. It's driven by fear that we're missing out. It's driven by a fear that we are somehow not as good as somebody else that we see. It's driven by an insecurity about our goodness, an insecurity about our value. It's driven by an insecurity about our worth compared to somebody else's, right? And so that's where that fear comes from. It's driven by a perception of inferiority. I look at somebody else and I see what they have, and I feel worse about myself because I don't have what they have. I've not accomplished what they've accomplished. I don't possess what they possess, and that is what envy That's what envy eventually comes to. It's all about competing. Envy is a competition with somebody else. Greed is not. Greed is I see something I want and I desire it and I want to go get it. Envy is I just want to have it because it makes me better. It makes me feel better. It makes me look better. It makes me think I'm going to live a little bit better and be a little bit better than somebody else. It's not the idea. Envy is not the idea of being my own best person. Envy is just, I need to be better than you. I need to be better than the next guy. It's not living the best life that I can live. That kind of virtue is good. It's about being perceived and feeling better than somebody else. In the Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas defined envy as a pain of resentment. A pain of resentment. And that can go both ways. Envy means that I can resent myself because I feel like I'm not good enough. I think I'm not good enough, and so I resent who I am, and I have all kinds of self-image issues because of that envy. But I can also resent other people. If you find yourself criticizing when others are doing well, they got a promotion, and you criticize it. They got a raise at work, and you criticize that. You find some flaw in there. That's envy, because they got it and you don't. They bought something that you wanted. They got the boat, they got the car, they got the house, they got you name it. And you don't have it, and you criticize what they've done. You criticize what they bought. You criticize the very fact that they have it and you don't. That's envy. They have some kind of success in their life, and you perceive that, you notice that, and you criticize their success. You criticize their kids' success. You criticize their family successes. That is envy. It's not that you want that, it's that you don't want them to have that. If you find yourself rejoicing when other people's flaws are noticed, when other people fall into hard times, you resent that person, and you're happy when something bad happens to them, when something you like happens to somebody that you don't like, and you rejoice over that. That is not greed, that's not coveting, that is not jealousy. That is the biblical idea of what we call envy. Its trademark desire is for everybody to be as unhappy and unsuccessful as I am. It doesn't mean that I'm better. It doesn't mean that I'm garnering more for myself. It just means I don't want you to have what you have so that I feel better about myself. Scripturally, there are a couple of stories that sometimes get lumped in with envy. One is King Ahab, and if you're familiar with the story, he was a very conflicted king of Israel. His wife Jezebel had a lot to do with that, I believe. But there's a particular story where King Ahab wants a vineyard that belongs to somebody else, Naboth's vineyard. And King Ahab wants that vineyard. Naboth won't sell the vineyard. And the picture that we get of King Ahab in that story is a man who goes to bed and he turns towards the wall. He didn't have to face anybody, and he pouts himself to sleep. And Jezebel goes and says, Ahab, you're the king. You can do whatever you want to do. Why don't you just go take the vineyard by force? And you probably know how that story ends. Ahab wanted a vineyard. He wanted something that didn't belong to him, and he went and took it. That's not envy. I think about King David, maybe a more well-known story. David, king of Israel. At the time when the kings went out to war, David is not going out to war. Instead, David is sitting around the house. And from his perched view, sitting around the house, he looks out and he sees a woman that he likes, Bathsheba. And David's lust, maybe fueled by his covetousness, his greed, and he says, I want that woman. I don't know what he knows about Bathsheba. He finds out information about her, that she is somebody else's wife, that she's married, and he doesn't really have a right to her, but he doesn't care. But in King David's escapade in 2 Samuel 10 and 11 and 12, it's not that he wants to take something from Uriah, who's married to Bathsheba. He doesn't really care. It's that he wants her. He sees what he wants, and he takes it. That's coveting. I think I would say that is lust mixed together with greed. But those are not the biblical picture of envy. The biblical picture of envy, how we define it today, comes way back in Genesis chapter 37. And in Genesis chapter 37, there's a man we meet there named Jacob. And Jacob has beautiful family, 12 sons who are going to be rulers in their own right. They become the 12 tribes of Israel, the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Gad, you know the list. One of those is named Joseph. One of his sons is named Joseph. He's the younger one. He is clearly dad's favorite. He gets special treatment. He gets maybe whatever he wants. And that probably tells us a little bit about Jacob as a father. It tells us maybe a little bit about Joseph as a son, but in the story, we learn a lot about the brothers of Joseph. And here's what we learn in Genesis chapter 37. Jacob, dad, has given Joseph, the son, a beautiful coat, multicolored garment, probably very expensive in that time. He had a bunch of kids, and only one of those kids got the coat, and it's Joseph. You can imagine how the other brothers felt about Joseph getting the coat, and they got nothing. And so if you read through the text of Genesis chapter 37, what you'll find there is that they are upset, and they are angry, and they mention the coat several times. It's not so much in Genesis 37 that they want a coat like Joseph's. That would not be a big deal. I assume that Jacob probably could have found enough funds to go buy enough coats to outfit his entire family, but that's not what they are concerned about. What they're concerned about is if we don't have a coat, then we don't think Joseph ought to have a coat either. And if we're not going to be the favorite, then we don't think Joseph ought to be the favorite either. They're not really wanting something in return for this. All they want is for Joseph to be brought down to their level, even below their level. Because the first suggestion they have is our dad likes our brother, little brother, more than he likes us, and so we got to do something about this, not to elevate ourselves, but to bring him down, and so why don't we kill him? And then Reuben speaks up as, I guess, somewhat a voice of reason and says, no, let's don't kill him. Let's sell him as a slave in a caravan that's heading down to Egypt. We'll bring him down to our level like that. We'll sell him as a slave, and so they sell him as a slave. And with that coat, you know, the coat, they cover it with blood and make it look like he's been murdered or killed or something like that. The coat. We don't get one. Nobody's making 12 coats of many colors for everybody else. But what matters to them at that point is that Joseph is brought down to their level, right? They resent Joseph and his good fortune and his status as dad's favorites. They can't stand that he's got it better than they do. And so they want him to not have what they don't have. This is the original story of the man who's granted a genie's wish. Have whatever you want, just your rival gets more, twice as much. This is the brothers saying, we don't want anything great for us. We want Joseph to be brought down to our level, even below our level. That's envy. That is criticizing when others have it a little bit better. That's rejoicing when people that we don't like get what we think is coming to them. It's hoping for, working for the time when everybody is as unhappy and as unsuccessful as we are. Is it a problem for you? Is that a problem in your mind? This is one of those things that's often hidden from us. And it's hidden from us because in my understanding, this is just kind of how our world works. But here's the danger of it. And I got a checklist for us to get through in just a few minutes. But here's the danger. Number one, envy is just a comparison trap. Envy is what happens whenever we look at what we are and what we have and who we are, and we compare it with what we see in somebody else and what we think about somebody else, our perception of somebody else. We start comparing ourselves with others, and we start to envy them. And it's not that we want to be better sometimes. It's that we'd be okay if they were just a little bit worse and brought down to our level. Jordan Peterson's rule number 4 is this: compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. That's better. That's a good comparison. We'll revisit that in a few minutes. But comparison breeds envy. I forgot how I put number 2 on the list on the slide this morning when I made that slide. But I'm going to go a little deeper than that, I think, now. I put on the screen engineered envy. And what I mean by that is very simply social media. It's no secret, and I don't want to go from preaching to meddling, but I think I may for just a minute if that's all right. It's very clear that social media is completely designed to make us envious, to keep us tuned in, to keep us enthralled with what other people are doing so that we compare ourselves with them and we envy them more. And then in turn, we try to highlight our life, the good part of our lives, so that people may envy us. That's what the algorithm does. That's how it's engineered. We see somebody else's composite self, and what I mean by that is we see their good sides. Nobody's going to put forth the negative flaws that they have. Nobody's going to, put out there the first picture they took of themselves. It's going to be the 21st picture they took because they want to make sure that they got it right. And then we compare the life that we live in our boring Saturday with what somebody else has been doing on Saturday, and we feel a little bit worse about ourselves, and that breeds envy. It's engineered specifically to be that way, and that much is irrefutable. If you want proof, you can go look at the teenage mental health statistics that began around 2010. And that's important because in 2007, 2008 is when smartphones really became widely available. 2010 is when we started putting those smartphones kind of in the hands of our teenagers. And then a little bit later, a couple of years later, is when we started granting those teenagers with smartphones access to social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. And at that point, we enabled our children to compare themselves every minute of every hour of every day with everybody around them. And no wonder the teenage mental health, especially among females, spikes beginning around 2012, 2013, 2015. And it's all due to this deadly vice that I'm calling envy. We compare ourselves, we look, we see how well others present themselves, and we only feel worse about ourselves. That's what envy does. All the other vices we're going to talk about, most of them are fun. Gluttony, hey, it's fun to eat good food. I love doing that. Lust, that's fun. Anger, man, it feels good to let somebody know what's on your mind and let them know what they had coming to them. That feels good. Vainglory, feels good to have everybody praise you and make you think that you're so good and things like that. Envy's different. While most sins and vices are enjoyable, we get something out of them, envy only makes you and everybody around you miserable. It's no fun for anybody. Nobody likes it. But we do it. It's engineered somewhat into our world. The fourth thing on that list on your screen is that envy is the enemy of love. Mark read for us in Matthew chapter 22 a few minutes ago, the greatest command. I'll read it again. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, said, "What's the most important thing in the law? What's the greatest commandment, most important thing in the Bible?" What's your read on it, Jesus? Common question that they would ask traveling rabbis, teachers of the law. What is your take on what's the most important thing in these scriptures? And Jesus says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with your soul, with your mind." That's the first and greatest. And the second is like it. Jesus says there's not one, but there's two, and they go hand in hand here. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. You know what you do when you love somebody? You rejoice when they rejoice. Don't you? You think about, maybe. You think about your closest friends. Whenever they have a great accomplishment, you rejoice with them, don't you? If you don't envy them, you rejoice with them. If they are your close friend, but you still harbor a little bit of resentment or bitterness towards them because you perceive they got it a little bit better than you may not. You may fake the rejoicing when they rejoice, but if they are your true friend and you love them and it's a genuine, honest relationship, then you rejoice when other people rejoice. What do you do when they suffer hard time, when there's been a death, when there's been a diagnosis, when there's been a job loss, when something terrible, disastrous has happened to them? You don't rejoice if they are your close friend and you care about them and you want the best for them and you love them. When they suffer loss, you suffer loss. That's how friendships work. That's how relationships work. That's how the church is supposed to work. When one of us rejoices, we all should rejoice. When one of us suffers, we all should suffer just a little bit. That's what love is. When you love, you rejoice in others' good and you mourn in others' suffering. When you envy, you resent the good that other people experience and you rejoice when they suffer. That's envy. And that's why envy is the enemy of love. It prevents you. If you have envy in your heart, and what that means, again, is that you resent or you're afraid that somebody's got it better than you. If that's what you have in your heart, if that's your vice, one of your vices, then it totally prevents you from loving your neighbor as yourself. You can't rejoice when others rejoice because you secretly feel pretty miserable about them being better than you. You can't suffer when others suffer because secretly you're a little bit happy that they're going through some difficult, dark times. That's envy. And that's why envy is the enemy of love. Even when we come out ahead, when we perceive that we're doing better than somebody else, we lose because envy means that we forfeit the possibility of loving our neighbors and having good, genuine, sincere relationships with other people. That's the danger. It compares what we are with what we think about somebody else. Social media makes it multiple times worse in today's world because it engineers envy in our lives and worse in the lives of our children. It makes us all miserable and it prevents us from loving. Well, how in the world do I know if it's a problem for me? I have a checklist. And we're going to work through these pretty quickly, but one by one. And I would like for you to think honestly, sincerely, because look, no secret, these are poisonous things in our lives because they hide themselves from us. And we have a little bit and we start to not notice it and we become a little bit inoculated, I don't know the word, immune to it a little bit, right? And so a little bit more is okay and we don't notice it. And then we're outright full of envious rage before we realize it. And so maybe it's hidden from you right now, but I got a checklist here of 10 or 12 things that I would like for us to really think about. Do I do this? Is it potentially in me and I don't even know about it right now, this poison that is going to be so infectious that it destroys who I want to be? Like, for instance, do you feel offended whenever you notice the talents and successes and good fortune of other people? Do you say, great job, I'm proud for you, but deep down you kind of say, why them? Do you notice in your life that there may be selfish or unnecessary rivalries or competitions? What I notice about this is that the envious person, they feel this selfish, unnecessary rivalry or competition, and the one that they think they're in competition with has no clue. They didn't know they were in a game. They didn't know it was a competition. And so the relationship goes bad, and one party is left saying, what in the world happened? I didn't even know that you felt that way. I didn't feel that way. I didn't have any envy in me. But the envious side notices an unnecessary selfish rivalry or competition. This one's pretty easy. Do you notice yourself secretly taking some pleasure when other people fall into difficult times or face some kind of distressing situation in their life? You'd never say it. But do you secretly feel a little bit of pleasure when they fall into distress? Whenever you see people doing things and you maybe you question what they're doing and maybe you don't question what they're doing, but you see what somebody else is doing, do you sometimes have a problem and you notice this, maybe you read false motives into their behavior? They may have had an absolutely good reason to buy that vehicle or to buy that house or to do that thing. Who knows? They may have had a great reason to do that. But you don't know that. There's information you don't know. There are facts that you are not aware of. And so to fill in the blanks, our mind helps us here. We read some false motives. They must have bought that car because a couple years ago I bought a car and they couldn't have me having the newest car, so they had to go buy a car. I can't believe they did that. That's not their motive. The car was breaking down. It needed $5,000 in repairs and might as well just go ahead and trade the thing in. Don't read the false motives in. Do you notice that sometimes you read false motives into their behavior? Do you notice, now you would probably not do this to this person, but do you notice yourself sometimes belittling them? This can be done in your mind, where you kind of justify what they've done or not done as opposed to what you've done or what you've not done. And because you feel a little bit bad about that equation, you belittle them. Do you sometimes find yourself making false accusations against other people? Not based in fact at all, but you maybe have invented it in your mind and maybe you believe it in your mind, and so you falsely accuse people. That's a sign of envy. A couple of words that we may need to define here: backbiting and slander. Backbiting, definition, is saying something bad about somebody, even if it's true, but it's behind their back. Could be true. It could be one of those things that you like about somebody that you don't like. You like that it happened to them. You like that they're dealing with this. You like the distress, the struggle that they've got in their life. And so you talk about it behind their back. It's the whispers behind the back. and it's saying something negative about them, even if it's true, but they'll never know about it, that is backbiting. You are devouring them from the backside. They don't even know about it. A similar checklist problem for envy is slander. Slander is not doing it in private and secret. It's not sending the text message that nobody else is going to know about it. Slander is, I'm going to say it out in open. It's making the Facebook post that everybody's going to know about. That's what slander is. It's not backbiting. It's not devouring somebody and they don't even know about it. It's outright putting something out there, even if it's true, in the open that's damaging to somebody else because, like Joseph's brothers, like that man who had the genie wish, you don't really care what you look like. What you care about is they are brought down. And if you got to do it behind their back and only a few people know how bad they are, in your opinion, great. But if you got to do it out front so everybody in the world has access to what you say about them, then even better. Saying something bad about somebody out in the open. A surefire sign of envy, I think, is initiating or collecting or retelling gossip. Some things you like about some people that you don't. That's gossip. Can be true, could be false, doesn't really matter. As long as it has the potential of elevating you a little bit, and even if it doesn't elevate you a little bit, it brings them down a few notches. Signs of envy. There's the checklist. I don't know how many I gave you, 10, 12, something like that. If one of them hit home for you, maybe you're a backbiter or a slanderer, I don't know. Or maybe you're somebody who doesn't do any of that stuff, but you secretly feel a little pleasure when somebody else feels a little distress. How do you overcome that? Well, it takes work, and I will give you 3 ways that you can do it. The first way is to love your neighbor. That's the greatest commandment, liken to it, love your neighbor as yourself. The first way to cure envy, and this is a choice. If you're an envious person, you will not feel like doing any of these. All right? These are not actions that are led by your feelings or your emotions. These are actions that must start with you doing these things out of your will. You have to say, I recognize that envy could be a problem for me, and I don't feel like loving my neighbor because I secretly envy my neighbor right now, but I'm going to do this thing in order to overcome my vice of envy. And the first thing is to love your neighbor by seeking the good of others in ways that nobody will ever notice. Nobody's going to know that you did the good thing. Nobody needs to know that you did the good thing because all that's going to do is elevate you and your vainglory. Don't do that. Seek the good of other people in ways that no one notices. It's hard to feel negatively about something that's happened positive in somebody else's life that I helped happen. And that helps us feel better about other people and less envious of them. Second thing that I would encourage you to do is to practice gratitude. Again, you're not going to feel like it. If you've spent the last months or years comparing what you are and who you are and what you've got with what you perceive in everybody else, then why would you practice gratitude? Why would you feel like practicing gratitude when what you really feel like is that everybody's got it better than you? And maybe on some level you feel like God's been better to them than he's been to you. And so why would I feel like practicing gratitude for what God has given me when I think he's given so much to others and I can't stand that he's given them so much? I want to pray the Psalms about them being brought low and not the Psalms about thank you, God, for what you've given me. And so you have to intentionally decide to practice gratitude for what God has given you. And the hardest one maybe here is number 3. If the comparison trap is stuck in my life, if that's what I do in my downtime, as I just get on social media, I compare myself with other people and feel worse about them and worse about myself, and this never-ending cycle of just being more and more miserable is where I am, then this is hard. But stop comparing yourself to other people. That's a surefire way to kill your joy. You got to stop it. And again, back to the thing. If you can't do it while you have the app on your phone, then delete the app off your phone. If there's no way for you to exist without scrolling and comparing yourself with everybody that you see and all the good times that you think they're having and all the good friends that you think they have, and you feel worse about yourself and worse about them and you can't love them and you're not grateful for what you've got, then delete the app and get rid of it. And stop comparing yourself with everything that everybody else is doing. Seek the good of others in ways that nobody notices. Practice gratitude for what God has given you, and my goodness, stop comparing yourself with everybody else. You'll never be content. It's a good desire to want to improve your life. It is a good desire to want to improve your situation, your family situation. It's a great desire to want to improve your faith. It becomes an evil desire when you want to do those things just so that you feel better than other people. That's envy. It becomes a much eviler, more evil desire when you don't care how good you are. All you care about is how bad they are or how bad you can make them look. That is envy. It's good to want to get the weeds out of your yard. That's a good thing. You don't have to wish for weeds in your neighbors. Don't compare yourself to other people all the time. That steals all your joy. A better way is to compare yourself today with who you were yesterday. A better way is to compare yourself today with who you are or who you were a year ago. And figure out what kind of progress are we making. How can we move forward from where we are right now? We compare ourselves right now with who I am, what I got. Compare that with where I was a year ago or some time ago and figure out, am I going forward to where I want to be? Am I being more of the kind of person that God would want me to be? Am I being more and more conformed into the image of Jesus, the Son of God? Or am I being more poisoned by the things that I allow into my life? Don't compare yourself with everybody else. Stop comparing yourself with others. Compare yourself with yourself and make the progress that makes you more in line with the life of Jesus. For you this morning, that could be that you begin this walk with Christ. You're baptized into Christ. You begin this journey of putting off the old and putting on the new, and you try to remove the poisons from your life that make you less of what you want to be and less of what God wants you to be, and you start trying to do better things, and you try to love your neighbor as yourself, and you love God, and you do unto others as you want them to do unto you, and you live a life that is more in line with the teachings of Jesus. Maybe you're a Christian, you've been one for a long time, but you're kind of an envious Christian. And that poison may be deep down in your life without you even knowing it. And so maybe you take one of those 3 action steps that I gave you at the end, and you decide today, I'm going to do one of those. I'm going to do something about this before this comes into a problem that wrecks my entire life and my family's life. Maybe there's some other response you have this morning to get some kind of poison out of your life. If you have any response, need, any way that you want to respond to the invitation of the gospel, we always invite you, and that time is now while we stand and sing this song of encouragement.